Well, hello everybody. I am devastated that I'm not there in Rome with you. I really wish I were, but I'm very, very grateful to be able to be included in this special session on researching, publishing across disciplines of law and psychiatry. At the moment, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and I have to be here because I'm a commissioner for the Royal Commission into the Victorian mental health system. And as you're viewing this, I will be probably sitting in the town hall hearing from various witnesses. So I hope you're having a wonderful time at the conference. I know this is towards the end, and I hope you've made some wonderful networks. So, the one benefit, I suppose, of being here is that I have Toby, the social equity dog, with me. I haven't had to leave him behind. And as part of my work with the Melbourne Social Equity Institute, we facilitate and encourage interdisciplinary research projects aimed at ameliorating disadvantage. So, part of my thinking every day is well, how do we encourage researching, writing, publishing beyond a single disciplinary focus? So, I suppose the first thing that we have to consider here are some of the key terms that are used in this particular area. Sometimes people talk about cross-disciplinary research, and this is where, say, for example, me as a lawyer will explore issues in the mental health system, for example, and cross over into psychiatry or psychology, social work, and so on. Then we have perhaps larger research teams coming together to conduct research from a multidisciplinary perspective. And here, each person keeps within his or her own discipline, but brings that perspective to bear on a problem or a solution. So it's not really about integrating knowledge as such, it's about just incorporating different disciplines to look at a problem. Interdisciplinary research, however, is slightly different in that the goal is to really talk between disciplines and perhaps come up with a new way and even a new discipline of approaching a problem or a solution. So, this is sometimes referred to as integrating knowledge. There's also this idea of transdisciplinary research, and I think this goes even one step further than interdisciplinary research, where you're really trying to create new concepts, new methodologies, new translational approaches, again about integrating disciplines, moving beyond just a silo discipline specific approach. That perhaps is the ultimate goal of collaborative research and perhaps is very rarely achieved. But what draws all these different ways of looking at research together or collaborative research is this idea that we are collaborating across disciplines. And sometimes this involves very large teams working on different projects. And it really does raise a number of issues and challenges in trying to go beyond traditional discipline mindsets. For example, I was involved with a project for the National Mental Health Commission here, looking at reducing seclusion and restraint practices in mental health services. And the project team, I think there's about 12 of us, and we came from law, psychiatry, psychology, social work. It was led by people with lived experience of mental health services, and it took us at least 6 months to actually come together and work out the requisite language we were going to use for this particular large-scale project. So you're really challenging theoretical constructs of your own discipline much of the time, as well as some of the research methods. And that particular project was both qualitative and quantitative research methodologies. I think an interesting question as part of this is whether some disciplines are inherently capable of collaboration. Well, I would argue as a lawyer that law can be seen as inherently inter or transdisciplinary. And this is because it's really grounded in political power and social power in the way that the law is shaped. And it's inherently related to other disciplines as it attempts to regulate many aspects of society. There's also, I think, a link between law and the social sciences. Social sciences are regularly consulted in law, for example, psychological concepts of intent in criminal law, and so on. So it really does lend itself to working in collaborations with other researchers in particular. There's an interesting study that's just been released by Khan and colleagues looking at which projects get funded by external grant bodies. And this is an Australian study, so it was looking at fields of research codes and working out which disciplines were the ones that were collaborating with each other and were ending up being funded. And perhaps not surprisingly, it found that engineering and the medical disciplines were the ones that were really collaborating with others. Not so much in the humanities, and there was a lot of research going on within the humanities, but not reaching out beyond that. So it's a really interesting study if you're interested in following this up. But it does seem to indicate that perhaps engineering, health related disciplines are more apt to collaborate with each other. Okay, some of the challenges, and this is what I deal with every day really as director of the Social Equity Institute, particularly when you're involved in large scale projects. There was a wonderful report done by Lauren Rickards back in 2014, and I have a citation for that coming up. And what she did was she interviewed people across the University of Melbourne as to the projects they were working on that had some interdisciplinary aspect. And she asked individuals, well, what were some of the difficulties? And from the individual level, it kept cropping up that there can be difficulties involved with the language being used, unfamiliarity with concepts across disciplines, and also this idea that perhaps one discipline led over another. There are also questions raised about group dynamics, some people putting in more than others, for example. There was this idea that if you were all in it together and really focused and passionate, it worked a lot better than if people just had their names on the project, for example. But there are also issues raised to resourcing this sort of research. It's much easier to stick within your own discipline and really, I suppose, look at the depth of that discipline rather than going across and working with people from other disciplines. She also looked at the organisational level of difficulty, and sometimes disciplines really mitigate against interdisciplinary research. So, as indicated before, sometimes within the humanities, it's very much a model of the individual researcher writing individual treatises rather than perhaps the more scientific side of collaboration in teams. There's also this idea of organisational culture may mitigate against interdisciplinary research, and of course the resourcing issue, that if resources go through faculties and schools, then that may mitigate against collaboration across faculties. And then finally, from the academic level, sometimes external funding agencies really drive the research that is supported, and often they're just based around various fields of research rather than focused around disciplinary collaboration. And again, from the interpersonal level, there may be pressures placed on academics just to do discipline-based work rather than collaborate across disciplines. And again, there may be resource issues from a government perspective. And certainly in Australia and perhaps in other countries, there have been cutbacks to public funding of universities. So there's a lot of challenges there, but what are some of the benefits? And again, in Lauren Rickard's work, and that's a citation for it, it's available online, she looked at different aspects of what she terms capital. So she talked about social capital, and this came up a lot with the individual reviews that she looked at, that there was this idea that you were in it together, that you had found like-minded people. So from that social networking aspect, there was a lot of benefits that flowed. In terms of intellectual capital, a lot of people spoke about coming up with new ideas, new perspectives, really finding ways of increasing their knowledge base, as it were. Emotional capital was really interesting. She found that her interviewees talked about feeling supported when you were looking at a project that you were really dedicated to, or a particular problem that you wanted to solve, to have other people around you that were as interested in solving that problem. That really led to emotional support. And of course, institutional capital, if you can find a way to solve these huge problems, that reflects on the institution as well. So moving on now to the International Journal of Law and Psychiatry. So I'm very proud and privileged to be an associate editor for this journal. When you look at the website, it stresses that the main aim of this journal is to be a vehicle for multidisciplinary research that looks at the interface between law and psychiatry. And I think that's really important to stress. It's not about law or psychiatry. Yet at the same time, we get a lot of papers that are either about law or either about psychiatry. And we get a lot of papers in, obviously, from allied disciplines, psychology, social work, and so on. But I think there's a lot of opportunities there for people to collaborate across those disciplines and have multi-authored papers representing people with different perspectives, not just the one. So at the moment, the default setting is we have groups of people or the one researcher from a specific discipline looking at a particular topic. But occasionally we get these really captivating papers that are truly inter or transdisciplinary in nature. And I'm thinking, for example, there have been a number of papers on neurolaw, so looking at neuroscience and what does that mean for legal regulation and legal concepts. And that does seem to lend itself more to interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary type research. So I think that there's a long way to go, but it would be really good for people to start thinking about reaching out and perhaps collaborating across disciplines in terms of submitting to the journal. So finally, I just want to say that Toby is here sitting on the path, and we don't know what's at the end of that path, but I think that really is a lovely metaphor for perhaps encouraging people to reach out and work across disciplines, to think of ways of solving problems, coming up with different perspectives that really moves beyond researching, writing and publishing, beyond a single disciplinary focus. Thanks very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session.